Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for being so punctual. We've got our next panel here, so let's get going. Session 2, which is titled "Assessing Capacity Building Gaps and Needs to be Addressed in Implementing NDCs in the Context of the Paris Agreement." And here we have representatives from various geographical groups and countries. So we'll be really listening to the perceptions and concerns of what country groups would like, and hopefully you will be able to guide the PCCB, what the PCCB would most helpfully be able to do to improve your situation. And the first speaker on the list is Clarence Samuel from the Marshall Islands.
Thank you so much. Before I proceed with my intervention, I'd like to thank the organizer for inviting me to participate. As mentioned, I'm from Marshall Islands, a country of little over 50,000 people. I'm saying that because that will be the backdrop of my presentation. At the onset, allow me to express my sincere appreciation on behalf of my delegation and to thank you for inviting me to speak on this important issue on capacity building and implementing NDCs in the context of the Paris Agreement. The Committee on Capacity Building was a key achievement of Paris Agreement. Indeed, the members of my delegations who are active in negotiating it have reminded me that the capacity building provision of the Paris Agreement were the first to be agreed on COP21. The existence of this committee reflects the critical importance of capacity building to fully implement the Paris Agreement. Indeed, political will, support, and capacity building are the three ingredients necessary to turn NDCs into reality. And unless these are done, the 1.5-degree limit will not be achieved, and the survival of my islands will highly place at risk. Now, I don't know if I can fully explain or put into context the struggles and the challenges the small island nations are faced with in terms of our day-to-day operations, but I'll promise to do my best. Capacity is perhaps the greatest hurdle to achieving our ambitious NDCs and to going even further into the future. Our National Energy Office has one staff member. This person is responsible for the governance of our entire energy system. My office, which oversees the adaptation elements of the NDCs, only has 2 staffs beside myself. The 2 staffs are responsible for the implementation of numerous convention, protocols, and treaties. In addition, the office is also the operational focal point for the aforementioned protocols and also the NDA for the Green Climate Fund. Implementation of the NDCs and all the complexity that comes with it is an additional responsibility on top of our core responsibilities. There is a constant struggle between doing what we can and being able to have the bandwidth to do even more, as others would like to say, do more with less. In addition to the capacity building at the national level, there also needs to be a more systematic and strategic way of building capacity and sharing experiences across countries, particularly within the regions. The NDC partnership, on which we are proud to serve on the steering committee, will hopefully help in this endeavor. More can be done, for example, by establishing regional centers of excellence to do with NDC implementation. A country like mine needs an easy way to pick up the phone to another country that has faced the same hurdles we are facing in delivering our NDCs. Now, despite all the constant struggle we're facing on a daily basis, My country's NDC represented the first economy-wide absolute reduction targets against a base year to put forward by a developing country. Just last month, our cabinet had just approved the establishment of a committee to oversee the implementation of the NDCs. This committee is tasked to explore possibility to fast track the implementation of NDCs. One way to streamline the process for securing support for SITs and to build capacity to make application for grants and other financial assistance. We all know that producing and processing application can take a phenomenal amount of efforts, delivering our limited human resources from their task to take up on additional desk. Developing countries have consistently pressed for increased capacity building to help them with implementation of obligation under the UNFCCC and now the Paris Agreement. The real issue is to make sure that the committee is not just another body that meets once in a while, but is really effective in taking things forward. In closing, the real challenge for the committee will be how to best add value to take cost of the capacity building forward, and not only taking it forward, but to ensure that the cost of implementation is taken forward most effectively and efficiently. In particular, synergies with various initiatives such as the NDCs partnership should be maximized and duplication should be avoided. Capacity building must involve not only building our expertise, but also building the member of experts locally. Too much is focused on the former, with outside consultant used to close gaps with the latter. There is now the sustainable model, and not only that, will deliver systematic change on the ground over the long term. Given his leadership in things like the I Ambition Goal, climate vulnerability, and steering committee of the NDC partnership, my country is well placed to take forward the cause of building regional capacity in the Pacific and the SIDS. And finally, the current paradigm should move away from using capacity as negotiating point and shift the issue toward implementation. And with that, colleagues, thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to hear from the Marshall Islands. In my previous capacity as CDKen, we were very pleased with our partnership and high ambition coalition and the influence it had in Paris. So that was a really, really powerful example of how a small country can achieve a lot. The next statement comes from the LDC group, Mr. Bubu Jallo from the Gambia.
Thank you, moderator. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to speak to this on issues that are related to the LDC's needs and gaps for the implementation of NDCs. You are a group that has got a lot to do. I'm saying it because I know how we have gone through to get this group in the UNFCCC process. I co-chaired most of the negotiations, and as co-chair, sometimes you lose friends. And coming from Warsaw to Lima to Paris, it was very tough. But we were able to get this committee on board. So don't think it is a period for you to enjoy. It is a period for you to work. And you must really work and deliver the results. That being said, I am speaking on behalf, okay, as a negotiator, sometimes we bring this language. I'm speaking on behalf of the LDCs. I've been nominated by the chair of the LDC group to come and make this presentation. Next. Okay. Oh,
It should work with that.
this one. Okay, technology. Okay. Now, the LDCs, there are 29 LDCs that have ratified the Paris Agreement. Of course, all of them have submitted their INDCs. Some have ratified, but some have not yet still ratified. And most of them are trying to transform their submitted INDCs to NDCs. And the estimated cost of all the INDCs from the LDCs is about 93.7 billion. Oh, that is different from the NAPAs. But these are very important and long term. Now, what is the status of capacity at the national and subnational levels? And many of the LDCs do not have climate or climate change policies. They don't have policies, not strategies, and systems that are needed to develop and efficiently and effectively implement the NDCs. Many of them, I'm not saying, at least the Gambia has a policy, but not yet a strategy. So it's a way forward for some, but some don't have some of these strategic and policy documents to even go forward. There are inadequate human and institutional capacities, inadequate number of experts and research and training institutions in the LDCs. Data and information are often fragmented. This is the existing situation I'm telling you now. Coherence and coordination among the relevant national institutions and funding entities are limiting. Most of the international support initiatives are ad hoc and project-based, with little or no efforts to build and retain skills and organizational and institutional capacities. So there is a lot of dynamism of whatever capacity is built, whatever experts are developed. Most of these experts move out of the country or from the institution that they are serving. If they stay within the country, then that is very good. The capacity is not lost, but sometimes the capacity is lost by people moving out. Also, regular monitoring and review processes necessary for sustenance of the capacity building efforts are either too weak or non-existent. So these are some of the capacity gaps that are existing right now. So what is it? It is important to recognize the needs gaps, that the needs and gaps vary by national circumstances. There can be institutional and technical, but they depend on the national circumstances of the country that is that we are talking about. And these are broken down into individual and institutional capacity building and raising of public awareness, resource mobilization, and absorbing finance for climate action. Absorbing finance for climate action is something that is very important. You may have finance that is coming in, but maybe the institution is not, strong enough to absorb at the rate that most of the donors would like to see the finance being absorbed. There is also a problem of planning for NDC implementation, and also there is need to strengthen institutions, including for coordination, coherence, MRV, and reporting. Now let us talk about institutional and human capacity. The institutional arrangements must be enhanced to allow for regular collection, management, and analysis of data information to support production of inventories, climate change projections, impact assessments, and further development of NDCs. Because if you want to transform your current INDC into an NDC, you need most of a good documentation of most of these issues. And currently, it is difficult to make climate change projections in some of the LDCs because, as I said before, data and information is fragmented. Sometimes it is difficult to come by, unless if you are able to. And most of the projections come from climate change models that you need to downscale to your local level. So this is a problem in LDCs. You need to adequately plan and budget for training and maintenance of a pool of skilled staff, the medium and long term. Yeah, as I said from the beginning, there are short-term capacity building measures that are not sustained. So there should be planning. If we are planning for the INDC, we need to plan for a long term and see how best we can sustain the capacity that has been built. I know some countries are very good at training and building capacities of a lot of people so that if some escape, there is still some that will stay. And I think India is very good at that. China is very good at that. Maybe South Africa is another country that is good at that. But for a small country like the Gambia, it is difficult. Now we need also to raise public awareness on climate change impacts, vulnerabilities, and so on. We need to build ownership of the NDC at the national, subnational, and local levels. As of now, I was part of the development of the INDC of the Gambia with support from CDKN, IIED, and there were a lot of stakeholder consultations as far as at the subnational level. But now, if you want to transform this, we will still have to go back to those stakeholders at the subnational level. So really, that is the way you can build partnership, the ownership of the NDC. You need to train on climate change responses, including mitigation, adaptation technologies across sectors and at all levels. You need to strengthen climate information systems at local, national, and regional levels. At least in the Gambia, on that we have achieved something from the Jeff Early Warning Project. There are a lot of Jeff Early Warning projects in Africa now, and this is where you have 33 of the LDCs located. So really, in building climate information, something is going on, and I hope it is sustained. On resource mobilization and absorbing finance, we need to build awareness of resources of climate finance. Even today, some people are in the negotiations. I can hear some LDCs shouting to adaptation fund, shouting to CTCN, shouting to GCF. How do we do this? How can we get this from you? So, especially if you go to the national level, if we who have been interacting with GCF, Adaptation Fund, and all the other funds still ask, how do we do this? Now, what about the subnational level institutions? They wouldn't know, because we are the ones who are supposed to go back and tell them how to do it. But we are still asking. So really, in terms of mobilizing resources and absorbing finance now, we need to know exactly the sources of finance, and of course, report back to our countries that these are the sources of finance, this is how you go about them, and so on and so on. So if GCF, Jeff, CTCN, and everybody who is related to that is here, we need you to do more work on that in supporting maybe some trainings and collaborating with the LDC expert group. Now, this is the group that we know very well. This is the group that we can always assign homework to do. So we would definitely need all of you to collaborate with the LEG, so that the LEG is our advisory group on everything. You know, not only adaptation, we ask them to do a lot more. And some of these financing institutions should also work with the LEG. Now, we need to ensure that climate finance reaches the poorest and most vulnerable. This, I have always stressed this, even outside the LDC and the LEG, that climate response does not take place in the offices. It has to take place at the local level where the people are more vulnerable. You cannot do adaptation in your office. You have to go to the people and do adaptation there. These are the people who are more vulnerable. And if you try to use all the funds buying yourself an expensive car or computers and so on, and leaving the poor, then you are not addressing climate change. I said this at different fora, whether it is at the national or international. Now you have to build capacity to absorb finance and manage climate change programs to implement NDCs effectively. Our capacity to absorb finance must be enhanced. And here, we also need to support national in getting accredited to facilitate direct access from GEF or from GCF or from Adaptation Fund. Some of us don't have accredited entities to have direct access. And I don't know how much is on the plate of the implementing agencies and those who are accredited. It looks like they're flooded with. So if we have national accreditation and these people are able to access funds directly, again, they must be capacitated to be able to absorb. Planning for the NDC implementation, we need to remove political and economic barriers to mitigation and adaptation response, including through technical assistance and financial support. We need to align various activities between ministries and sectors. Some ministries and sectors in countries and the LDCs still work in silos. Information, they are hoarding documentation. So you need to remove all that. And we can only do that by having a very effective ministry, a very effective committee that is very inclusive. And if we don't have that and just try to be, working because it's not good for implementation of whatever, especially for the NDCs. You need to you need to adopt strategic perspectives that aim to achieve transformational impact by supporting scalable or sectoral investment plans. Not only small things that we started with the NAPAs, and now we have upscaled the NAPAs, and we are now going into NAPs and NDCs. So this has to be something that is beneficial to a maximum number of stakeholders, not only within. So we need to translate the INDCs into concrete plans, projects, and programs. But again, that needs capacity building for the countries. And PCCB, we are going to overwork you just as we have overworked the leg. We have, in the Paris Agreement, you have some examples of roles that you will be doing, but the LDCs are very good at negotiating their way so that things are increased beyond what you are assigned to do. So you have to expect that. Next. Implementation must be grounded on provisions for MRV. As I said at the beginning, at the current level of capacity, MRV is maybe not much of in the dictionary of LDCs. So we need to align resources and capacity integration with national development and policy planning. That is good. Build and maintain synergies and avoid overlapping scope and partners in project implementation. That is currently happening. You have one project being implemented almost in the same area by one sector, and another sector comes very close to that one, and there is always an overlap. And that is not helping in the efficient resource management. So we need to learn how to do that. We need to learn how to manage resources efficiently. At the national level, we need to establish a forum for exchange of implementation approaches, tools, and lessons learned, and also country-to-country exchange by capacity building practitioners. This is very important. The LEG is doing this in the area of NAPAs. by organizing expos and so on. So we would also like the PCBC to look at that, how to help countries to implement, exchange implementation approaches, tools and lessons learned, and also country-to-country exchange by capacity building practitioners. Please look into that seriously, because it is helping the LDCs in the area of implementation of on NAPAs. And we need to build capacities for MRV reporting and transparency. Again, I'm presenting this to the PCCB so that the PCCB can take this into consideration in whatever they are going to do in the future. And I've been asked to come and present this by 48 LDCs. So it's not a small number. So again, as we, the Durban Forum, stressed on some things that the LDCs also want to stress here. Country ownership is key. We need a long-term approach to capacity strengthening, not a reliance on international consultants who fly in and fly out and so on and so on. And then we need importance of gender equality and inclusiveness through capacity strengthening processes. And we need to share knowledge through regional South-South, North-South cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a very comprehensive and important input to the PCCB to consider seriously.
Yes, thank you.
I'm turning now to Mr. Clifford Malung, representing the Adaptation Committee. Yeah, you can use the same mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And let me really thank the PCCB for inviting the Adaptation Committee to participate in your session, which you're assessing capacity building gaps and needs that are to be addressed in implementing NDCs in the context of the Paris Agreement. Following on Professor Jallo and a colleague, Mr. Samuel from the Marshall Islands, they have covered a lot of the linkages that exist between adaptation and capacity building. So I'm grateful for your presentation. However, I'll just speak of two areas that we think that we can work with the PCCB on. I don't have a presentation, so I'll just be reading. The Adaptation Committee is currently working on a range of topics that all have a certain relevance to the work of the Paris Committee in capacity building. You can see a detailed listings of these in the background paper on linkages with the constituted bodies under the convention that you have before us here at this meeting. For the sake of time and brevity, I would at this point like to highlight just two current activities of particular relevance. The first one relates to the technical support to developing country parties on adaptation. And this is one of the key issues that is in our role in the work plan. One of the objectives of the Adaptation Committee is to provide technical support to the parties. And the AC has dedicated one of its work streams to this topic. It is evident that national, regional, and international organizations, centers, and networks are pivotal in this matter. And the AC has reached out to many of them in the preparation of a regional assessment of support for adaptation action provided by regional institutions and UN agencies, and including gaps, needs, and opportunities. This was based on a call for submissions and followed up in two special events during the summer sessions of the SBs. In considering how to take this matter to its next level, the AC has started working with the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, which is the entity under the convention providing technical assistance to party on adaptation and mitigation technologies. The two secretariats are currently in the process of preparing an overview of the landscape of existing platforms, providing technical support to developing country parties on adaptation. And the AC is looking forward to considering progress made at its next meeting, which will be held here in Bonn in September. So I take this opportunity to thank the CTCN for their excellent collaboration and I hope that we can all benefit. I know we will all benefit when this overview is completed. The second topic I'd like to mention here is our work on methodologies for assessing adaptation needs. COP21 requested the AC to consider methodologies for assessing adaptation needs with a view to assisting developing countries without placing an undue burden on them, and to prepare recommendations for consideration and adoption by CMA1. The AC has in the meantime performed a desk review of existing methodologies and called for submission from parties and non-party stakeholders on this matter. These were then synthesized and analyzed all available information. Although this was only the groundwork to arriving at a good recommendation to the CMA, delegates may find the synthesis useful on our website. A very initial set of possible elements that could be included in the recommendations for the CMA was considered by us at our meeting in March. And in fact, the group is convening a special expert meeting tomorrow in which experts will have a chance to discuss and refine those recommendations to ensure that the perspective of and the scientific community is well reflected. We hope to finalize good recommendations by the end of this year. Chair, before closing, I'd like to use this opportunity to warmly invite delegates to join the technical expert meeting on adaptation, which will take place next Tuesday and Wednesday, the TEPEs of next week. The topic will be, integrating climate change adaptation into sustainable development goals and the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. I hope that you can, as many of you can make it to this TEPE on the 2 days. We'll be there. My colleagues from the adaptation committee and I will be available there for any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from the adaptation committee. And now we're turning to the least developed countries expert group. So Ms. Mary Yao from Bonn. Do we have
a question? What's the question?
Is it a question of clarification or?
No comment.
Okay, I thought we would actually, shall we take, I think we'll have the presentations and then we'll do the discussion afterwards. Yes, thank you. Mary, do you have one? Yeah. Here's the.
Thank you. Okay. Is that? Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think my presentation will just recap the gaps and needs because Mr. Bubu mastered about these issues and certain issues also are being taken into account with about by adaptation committee. So the legwork by supporting LDCs in NAPS process is guided by the vision that by 2020, all LDCs will have achieved the following, as well as structure, adaptation planning process, formulation of robust and good quality NAPs, implementation of prioritized adaptation needs identified in the NAPs with funding from the GCF and other sources, and demonstrable results in building adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reducing vulnerability of climate change in LDCs. So the LEG has undertook many activities such as elaborate guidance for NAPS process, how to formulate and implement NAPS, training on workshops on this guidance, and NAP Expo, which is an event to share experience and lessons learned in the process on formulation and implementing NAPS. So now with Paris agreements in relation to INDCs, many gaps and needs appear to be addressed in this way. So these issues like global stoptake, transparency framework for action in support, assessment by the SBI of the progress made in process to formulate and implement NAPS, the adaptation communications, the INDCs, modalities to recognize adaptation efforts of developing country parties as referred in Article 7, Paragraph 3 of this the Paris Agreement. Also, methodologies for taking into account steps to facilitate the mobilization of support for adaptation in developing countries in the context of the limit to the global average temperature. Methodologies also for revising the adequacy and the effectiveness of adaptation and support as referred in Article 2 of the Paris Agreement. We have technical needs which will be addressed, which require support for LDCs to address these issues. In the global goal on adaptation, don't we have to undertake capacity building activities to help countries or LDCs to be able to address this issue. Also, the links to sustainable development goal, which is an emerging challenge, how to make the linkage with adaptation or mitigation actions and sustainable development goals or eradicate poverty. We are also the formulation of NAP with funding from GCF. Many LDCs are not access to this fund because of the lack of capacity to formulate good project or good request to access to this fund. So we have to build capacity in this area also, and making entities to facilitate entities the access for national entities. I want to say the direct access to national entities. We also need additional guidance principle such as gender sensitivity in this area, and how to assess the co-benefits of adaptation and mitigation, and the adaptation continuum, monitoring and evaluation of action and support. All these issues need capacity building to be achieved. And more information for the presentation can be found in this document, the report, legal report, document FCCC SBI 2017/6. Now we are waiting for the strategy or how to collaborate between PCCB and LEG to help LDCs achieve or address all these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one more speaker on the panel, Mr. Naoki Mora from the Technology Executive Committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, moderator. I'd like to just share two things related to tech. One is I would like to share our activities on capacity development and NDC. And second is some kind of challenges on developing countries identified, and also would like to share some lessons learned through our work. And as you know, tech has been established to 2010, and our work is just analysis and provides policy recommendations to enhance climate technology development and transfer. And we try to maximize our work to put impact to the society through our tech briefs, kind of discussion paper or policy papers, and the key messages and recommendations to COP, and some guidances, some practical technical guidances as well, and then working with the key partners, including CDCN, JEF, DCF. First, I'd like to just explain about what we have done related to NDCs and capacity building. Last year, analysis of mitigation-related policy options of the TAPS means Technology Action Plans, and citizen requests. The objective is to support to increase the mitigation action ambition of climate action. The result was that we've just identified gaps with high interest or high needs, but low experiences in the field of especially industrial energy efficiency, and also some financial issues as well. Based on that result, the tech prepared technical paper and conducted thematic dialogues, and then issued brief paper on industrial energy efficiency. And another undertaking was the enhancing implementation of technology needs assessments. The result is we just recognize the importance of capacity development, development capacity for the process of preparation of TAP, technology action plans. And tech issued the publication called Guidance for Preparing a Technology Action Plan. This is the kind of a guidance to address what kind of procedure you have to take and what kind of issue should be addressed in each step. And this year, we're just working on those three issues mainly related to NDC and capacity building. One is innovation and research, development, and demonstration, R&D. The objective is how innovation can support implementation of technology elements of NDC. And we're trying to mapping out enabling environment and barriers through TNAs, NDCs, and citizens' request. We're expecting the outcome to be the special event on how innovation can support implementation of the NDCs. Second task is the South-South practical learning on adaptation technologies to enhance the visibility of South-South cooperation practical exchange on adaptation technologies. And we're trying to, get information, some good practices, some kind of mutual learning between the South-South countries on adaptation technologies. We're expecting the output would be a kind of a comparison of the good practices. And third undertakings is the analysis linkages, TNA and NDC process. This is trying to strengthening linkages between TNA, NDC, and NAP to enhance effective implementation. Through analyze how TAPs and TNAs could work as a platform for NDC and NAP implementation. For example, in the process of preparation and implementation of the TAPs and TAPs, some kind of organizational structure should be addressed, formulated, and the process should be in place, and then some kind of methodology has been taken. Such kind of process and the methodology could be applicable to the process of NDC implementation. And we were expecting the outcome is kind of a discussion paper or policy papers on linkages between TNA and NDC process. Then what we have learned, what we have found, the challenges and what lessons learned. Regarding challenges, through in the implementation of TNAs and TAPs, setting organizational structure and incentives for active participation of various stakeholders is very critical, but very difficult. And prioritization of sectors and technologies fitting to local conditions. So the prioritization is very important, but also difficult. I think the criteria for prioritization of the sectors and technologies very different country by country. Also, the third point is the identifying actions to address enabling environment in the technologies, like what kind of regulations and incentive mechanisms should be there, and what kind of market should be developed, etc. And applying cost and benefit analysis, especially about benefit, what kind of benefit you have to count. Since for example, adaptation projects, there should be a multi-benefit project, so we have how to count the benefit from the point of the cost analysis. And then identifying funding sources, both in public and private, internationally and domestically. And lastly, I'd like to just share some lessons learned. One is engage the stakeholders from a broad range, legislation in a national level to the community level, and then form a core team of stakeholders, and actively engaged high-level decision makers, and also involve the financial experts is very important. And finally, involve the champions who can diffuse the prioritized technologies. Those are the learned through our work. You can see the pictures of tech members. All of them just send a message to you. The tech looks forward to further collaboration with PCCB. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it's, of course, interesting to see and good, natural to see that we're getting sort of reconfirmation of many of the things that were identified earlier today, also from your own analysis. So clearly some of the messages are becoming very obvious. Now we have about 50 minutes for a roundtable, but before that, I think as there may be one or two questions of clarification before we get to a roundtable. I open to the floor quickly for Q&A. So you had one question over there.
Thank you, sirs and madams. I welcome the. I'm from Yango. Thanks. I welcome the intervention from the Gambia, which touched on much more concrete, and also often the Marshall Islands, on much more concrete things to be done. It's like this morning, it was by Burundi was mentioned that we still lack some technical facilities to take part in this, as already mentioned yesterday by some of our colleagues. There is some lack of technological access in the global south, and while we totally understand this and think it's really relevant, I think that the UNFCCC should be able to provide the necessary access as you are in the 21st century, with some PV systems, batteries, mobile phone, through satellites. I think there could be some investment be necessary, and then we could get start working much faster on this. That's I would request the Secretariat or the CTCN to the required needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Does anybody have questions of clarification or such comments? Otherwise, I will introduce you very quickly to a discussion theme. If not, then yeah. Now we have time for a roundtable discussion with the participation of all the PCCB members, and of course representatives of these constituted bodies that have just spoken, and the presenters, and also potential interventions again from observers attending this session. And the guiding questions for this roundtable discussion are twofold. One, which are the main human, institutional, and systemic capacity gaps and needs identified by developing countries in implementing NDCs? So hearing from the others that have not spoken yet, and what are some of the existing and innovative solutions to address the capacity needs and gaps identified above. And of course, the more you can bring good ideas to the PCCB on what its relevance within its mandate and capacity would be, how to prioritize what to do first, and what the PCCB's value added, where it could be the highest. So with this, I open the floor first to the PCCB members and to ask questions from our panelists and give their own comments, and then we'll expand it also to the rest of the room. Any PCCB members? Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, presenters and moderator, for giving us this platform to say one or two points. First of all, from the outset, let me assure Bubu that this particular committee actually is well positioned to work through different challenges and provide that particular platform for developing countries to build their capacity in terms of meeting their obligations as contained in the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and now the Paris Agreement. There has been a lot of recommendation or good points coming from the presentation. And I know that these particular recommendation or points, at one point will have to find themselves into the work program for the PCCB. However, we need to inform our colleagues that we are yet to still put in place the mechanisms of how we can actually turn those particular recommendations into actions. But we are forward looking as a committee. We'll make sure that we work on those and ensure that we move the process forward. I specifically picked on certain points which were very vital to the works of the PCCB. I noted that the representative of the leg brought out various processes that are key to inform the work program of the PCCB when it comes to identifying the gaps and the need. For example, she talked about the stock taking. I'm just giving one example, stock taking, which will happen in 2019. That will be a very good basis for us. The result of that particular process will actually help us to work plan. And also from the LODC's presentation, there was one key point of this particular committee being asked to actually realign or align the various activities at country level to ensure that there are well elaborated structures that will actually link our work to those activities or structures at country level. So I thought that that is one key issue that we'll take into consideration as a committee. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Do we have other PCCB members wishing to contribute? Matti?
Thank you. If you allow me, Bubu, we are brothers in the capacity building family, and you had an interesting presentation, and you have been a part of putting together this committee. So, what do you feel that what should be the priority actions the committee should look at? Sorry to put on your spot.
Yes, this is a very good question. You have a lot on your plate from now on, but you need to prioritize. And for the LDCs, I think the highest priority now is how can the PCCB and other bodies under the convention support the LDCs in transforming their INDCs into NDCs. This is the highest priority, and that's, I believe, is the starting point. And I am sure you cannot do it alone. You can do it with other bodies. You can do it with the leg. You can do it with the TEC and CTCN, because all the INDCs, have capacity building issues, have technology issues, and you can collaborate. But the first priority of the PCCB in supporting LDCs would be to transform their INDCs into NDCs. A good example is the Gambia. We presented our INDC. We have a big cost, but then the cost is not broken down. Okay, and it is maybe because we cannot do it. We are not able to do it, and costing is a very key issue, but it is not in the capacity of a lot of LDCs to sit down and systematically or itemize and cost what it would be for the implementation of an activity. So really, here we have good ideas in our INDCs, but if you look at most of the INDCs, you only have a big, broad cost. Some of them don't even have costs. First thing for the PCCB and other bodies to do is to help LDCs transform their INDCs into NDCs and also move ahead with trying to see how best we can have good activities that are well costed and implementable.
I don't let you go so easily, Bubu. In practice, what this does mean? So apparently, we should analyze what we have now learned and see that where are the gaps, and then we should look at that who could fill the gaps. But of course, one thing is that we are not coming to Gambia, even though I would like to come. But do we have a common understanding that is that the way how to approach it?
Yeah, there are different ways of doing it. I am aware that most of these bodies under the convention do site visits. They don't do site visits. But if you can solicit effective reporting and documentation of what is happening at the national level and get it in your program and review it, then you can know exactly what is wrong at the national level. But I expect you to come on holidays, yes, in the Gambia, but not as a PCCB member to work. But really, yes, we don't expect almost everybody to come at the national level to see what we are doing, but look at our reports and maybe continue the discussion with us either in this type of fora or so. Let me give you a good example of what we have in with the technology issues. We have activities that are identified in the INDCs. Some of these technologies you can say, okay, this is the technology that we may need for this activity. But now that technology needs to be acquired. To acquire that technology and use it, you must also assess how useful it will be for your implementation. So you go through not only technology needs assessment, you go through barrier analysis, you go through development of taps and so on. Of course, capacity building issues there, which the CTCN is doing, but you also need to know how best those capacity building issues are addressed, what are the gaps, because it's not that everything you can be addressed through that process. And then we work towards it. But all of these things are geared towards the NDC. Yeah.
Ahmad?
Thank you very much. My intervention is very short. For the NDC, I think that we have three pillars. We have the governance, because it's very important, because if we don't have the ownership very clear, I don't think that we can do the implementation. And the second pillar is the process for the planification. I think that it's very important. And the third pillar is the implementation for the NDC. We have three pillars. And for the first one, I think that it's very important that the governance know exactly what does it mean, the NDC. That's why I am agree with Leg about you have to link NDC with fighting poverty. Because right now the NDC is dealing with the CO2. I think that we have to switch to some numbers that all the political level can understand. I think that it's very important, and it will be a first step, because and also when we talk about the governance, many NDCs was done by the expert, and they didn't care about the barrier, that the regulation, for example. Because when we talk about the mobilization of finance, we have to mobilize the private sector also to invite to be in the concept of implementation of NDC. I think that there are some steps. For me, it's very important to be very concrete, because when we talk about capacity building, we must do something different than before, because before we have capacity building dealing with the process of negotiation, but right now we have the process where we have two track. We have negotiation track and we have action track. That's why I think that we have to have capacity building that integrate, stakeholder. And I propose that maybe we can have some meeting with LDC and some with the tech, with the Jeff, and to see really how we can formalize a work problem, a work plan with the LDC group. Thank you very much.
Crispin?
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. I can identify with what Bubu is saying about the converting INDCs to NDCs, because when NDCs were being submitted, a lot of them put in, I would think, just lump sums, with the more detailed, costing and budgeting having to follow. And, it is, in some cases, as you said, for a lot of LDCs, some countries in the Caribbean, for example, didn't even put a costing behind it, or into the NDCs, or some costed the mitigation part. Others had put no costing for adaptation, and that ties in, I think, with the presentation by my dear friend Clifford from the adaptation committee, because a lot of countries were much more specific with regard to adaptation and much less with mitigation, and much less focused in terms of details on adaptation. In fact, some countries were wary of mentioning adaptation because, how do you quantify and this kind of thing. And so, the work that Clifford has referenced in terms of looking at methodologies for assessing adaptation needs, I think, that kind of work is critical, and the associated building of capacity, has to accompany that. And these are some of the things that we need to flag. And just one last word with regard to NDCs in particular. I'm just using the case of St. Lucia specifically. The two main components from a mitigation perspective in our NDC are on the energy or electricity and transport sectors. We wanted to put in some work on land use and and trying to put in work in our forests, include forests as a means of as sinks, obviously, but we did not quantify any targets, because there is a lot of gaps in terms of our data and so on for forests. And I think that is the case for a number of other countries. And because some of our, well, the data, and secondly, you have spotty data. Even if you have good methodologies, it's it's spotty data in, spotty models out or spotty results out. So that is something that is would need some. I think that's an area where capacity would need to be built in terms of getting a firmer handle on the figures and being able to give something more definitive in an updated or subsequent NDCs. Thank you.
I think next one is Renilde.
Thank you. Thank you again. I would like to thank the presenters and the comments on the adaptation for capacity building for adaptation. Most of our countries in Africa are vulnerable. I will only give one example. How local communities now live or have adapted to HIV/AIDS than before. Many capacity building were made. Many awareness was made. But the governance and the politics we have regarding that issue was not changed like now. So it means that if we talk about governance, we have to put clarity. We have politics because the convention, we are members of the convention parties, and we had negotiated a long time, and parties adopted the Paris Agreement. So now if we talk about capacity building for adaptation, we have to go ahead to look at really how local communities can be adapted when the impact, it did not choose decision makers or not. So I appreciate that you say in the presentation that capacity building is transformation in action under the ground. So we can take the one example, the politics will, the volunteer of us, and not join governance a lot to the capacity building, otherwise we will fail. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Bupu wanted to give a reply.
Thank you. I think we can start at the level of governance, which is really very important. But this is not political governance, because if you tell somebody a political governance, then he is frightened. We're talking about climate governance, climate change governance. And yes, we are now about 23 years old in the convention. So we should definitely have got something by now. It is not the starting point of capacity building, but just as data and information and so on is fragmented, so also capacity building is so ad hoc and fragmented. Our negotiations, that is why we recommended that we should have the PCCB to be able to have a thumb on what are the capacity building activities or achievements under the convention and its other instruments, particularly the Paris Agreement. Now, let me give an example of Gambia And then you will, this is going to inform Mohammed, where are we in terms of governance, climate governance. Maybe some other countries are ahead of us, but at least we are proud that we have some little bit of climate governance. And for those of you who know Gambia, when the Gambia chaired the LDCs from 2010 to 2012, there was a lot of achievements. And then the head of that negotiation team became a minister. And then he became, what is it called? He became the ambassador or special envoy for the Gambia and also the LDCs. So because of that, we at the national level, we were able to achieve something. We are able to now, we have a climate change policy funded by the EU, and thanks to the EU. But we are also able to have a medium-term strategy that has got climate change integrated in it, thanks to the CDKN that funded that also. Now, we are now also developing a climate resilience strategy funded by the World Bank under the PPCR. And that development and consultancy is headed by the one who was the minister, and also, but now he's no more the minister. So at least we are building something at the highest level. There is a lot of awareness and political buy-in in the Gambia in terms of climate change. And with funding from UNDP, we are now going to the development of a low carbon climate resilient development strategy. So you see, at that level, in terms of climate governance, the structures are being built. And all of these go with capacity building and so on. But if these things are not documented, maybe the PCCB adequately, if these are not documented, you cannot tell us how much we have achieved as a country. So that is why it is necessary that these things are followed up and reported. And, you know, if you look at some of the reports that we send to maybe the CDKN or to the AU, to the EU and so on, these things are there, but they need to also be adequately reported in our national communications, in our BURs and so on. And then it is from there that the PCCC can pick. And even when we come here as a country, simple, you can just give us a survey. You have built this capacity. Is it still there? What is happening? So you don't need to go to the Gambia as PCCB or as tech or as but simple surveys that you can conduct while we are here will give you some information. But governance, yes, some countries are even ahead of Gambia in that. But now with that governance at that highest level, at the technical level, this has to be translated into action. And this is where we are saying all the convention bodies, including PCCB that you are just beginning, should work around supporting us in moving forward, especially with our NDCs. I can assure you that of all, the groups that have the highest capacity in adaptation is the LDCs. We have got the capacity in, because in the implementation of NAPAs, the NAPAs have served as a learning mechanism for adaptation. Because after we were told in the 2001, 2002 that we can only access about 150,000 for a NAPA activity, Everybody learned that that was too small for a good activity to benefit a number of people and so on. Now NAPA projects are going into the millions because everybody has learned from 2001 to now that NAPA adaptation activity is costly. So now if we put money, projects forward, and we have learned from the Jeff how to develop projects. We have learned from the Jeff, and we have worked with the Jeff through the LDC expert group, how to expedite, project development and access to funds. It has been reduced by more than 50% the time period with Jeff. So we want to do the same thing with also with CTCN, also with GCF. But it is capacity that we have built so far, and we want to. But I can assure you, a lot of the countries under the LDCF also want to have projects that are submitted to the GCF, but GCF, some of the templates are not complete yet. They are not available. We are also learning from there, and we need all of us to work together to deliver. Yeah, as long as the local people are seeing benefits of what Bubu Jallo comes here and spends 3 weeks away from the country, we need to go back and show something that, okay, these local people, this is what we have brought back. This is what is your benefit, because they are the ones who should benefit most. So as this is now everybody's duty. Whether you are going to build governance at the top level, political buy-in, technical support, and now down to concrete work on the ground with the people who are most vulnerable. Some of us have got to that far for some projects like the climate change early warning system. If you go to the Gambia today, or if I open my my mobile, you can see how simple messaging by the traditional communicators. Simple messaging by mobiles is all available now up to that level. So it is for all of us now to work together, whether it is TEG, PCCB, CTCN, LEG, to be able to make things move to the ground level. Thank you.
This was very inspiring, and I have a couple of reflections from that, actually. I think you're confirming, again, giving a good example of what I emphasized earlier here today, the importance of leadership. That capacity building is happening, and so much capacity has been built since the Kyoto Protocol was established. There's no doubt about this. So nobody is starting from scratch. And your country shows that if there's dedication, there is also a lot of movement and implementation. So you have champions, those champions have achieved a lot. So now you have the big challenge. Some INDCs are so vague and general, they need to be transformed into concrete investment plans, actually. And that's a completely different competence that you need for. You don't model, you actually, it's not climate modeling or economic modeling. You're actually looking at a program, and then you put responsible institutions and cost to it. And there are huge gaps. There are lots of initiatives also that are trying to address that. The NDC partnership is all about it, but they don't have much money. There is a new NDC Quick Start Guide, which actually helps any country and to cut corners and do the necessary, so that you wouldn't actually sort of miss something important and things like that. So all of this is there. I think the big challenge for PCCB is now to sort of see how can PCCB be instrumental and helping in the right way and within its own mandate this process, and how to put that into a language that actually then is also interesting. And it's good that you brought us back to fighting poverty. That somebody here, that we shouldn't actually forget why development is there. You know, that this is what the NDCs are fundamentally about. Anyway, enough of me to blab, but let's expand this now. Anybody else? We still have 15 minutes or so to spend on the discussion. Nobody here, so at the back. Yeah, please introduce. Oh, sorry. Let's take a delegate first. Or I see. Yeah.
Thank you, Ari, and thanks to all the presentations. They brought a lot of information here and helped us to broaden our mind and to seek the way how this PCCB to moving forward. Well, if we see what happened on the ground about capacity building, those activities more relied on project. So even we have the framework there, and we have the guidance from the convention and the KP also to do all those projects. They are kind of it's one channel to do this. And when we talk about the NDC, this is the theme, which kind of this NDC actions need to deliver at national level somehow. This is kind of a little bit different from what happened on capacity building on ground, actually. Well, good as the good thing Bubu already brought us the things we have done on the ground in practical way. There's a lot of projects and a lot of capacity has been built. But now for the NDC, it's a little bit tricky. Like the government submitted the NDC in there at the kind of high level, and there's the whole picture about all these things. So for our committee, like a new broad committee, we kind of try to seek the way how to focus on the specific theme on the NDC. Actually, there's several initiatives focused on how to help NDC to implement. Well, since in the afternoon we have the feedback kind of from receivers or the institution who dealing those support a project involved on all those issues. Is there any expectation or your ideal way how our PCCB could help you from both from the project and at the national level? There's any ideal way you want to, or method or methodology, even from AC, to dealing with these two channels and to help build our capacity on ground? Yeah, Bubu.
Yes, I have an idea, and all of us have the same, almost the same idea. For the PCCB to help, I am saying again that the PCCB needs to collaborate with a lot of other institutions, but specifically, the PCCB has to bring out what are the successes in achievements in capacity building. You cannot do that as just PCCB. You have to check which other institutions have recorded some achievements in capacity building. But for the PCCB itself, it has to be responsible of now telling us exactly these are maybe the capacity building achievements recorded and so on in this region, in this place, and then bring those examples either in workshops or so that at least you tell other countries that we have picked this success story in on capacity building in this country. It is good. The approaches and everything are good. So please let's see if you can adopt this for your country. You can do that at a tech workshop, or you organize your own workshop. I am not sure you are still. I'm sure you are still struggling with costing, with money, as PCCB. But already there are institutions that you can collaborate with and bring those in those workshops. We are calling for the same thing in almost all the other thematic areas, not only capacity, but also in adaptation, in technologies, and so on. If you cannot do it alone, partner with somebody and then use that event to just inform and show best cases, best practices of how that capacity has been built and the achievements in those capacities. I think this is my take now.
Thank you. Before I go to the other question there, I think I'll give the floor to Clifford to elaborate on this.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Just to add a little bit to what Bobo has been saying, because he's been taking the brunt of the question so far. I've been provided excellent answers, that's why. But learning a little bit of a lesson from what we went through in the adaptation committee, and I've been fortunate to be on the adaptation committee since its inception. And so you're probably at that same place, but you have to build some coherence. So you have to, and I just heard what he's saying, that you must avoid overlap with the other bodies, with other organizations. So you must be able to streamline what is happening out there to fit what it is that the PCCB can bring. And you are the group that has to do it. The others are not going to be able to do it. So you're going to have to spend some time mapping all capacity building activities and then seeing how best, where you fit and how you can coordinate all those efforts. You have to identify partners. And these partners are inside the process itself, whether it's constituted bodies or the other UN agencies. You have to identify those UN agencies that are specific to capacity building activities, UNITAR, UNESCO, etc. And so you can bring them in a major way into your fold. But there are other institutions and partners outside of the process, whether it's universities, it's regional centers, etc., etc. So you're going to have to look at that. You're going to have to establish task force or working groups. So you can bring in additional expertise to your group to help you to find some of the solutions that you seek. NDCs, as colleague from China says, is a tricky one. It's a new one. We still don't have any guidelines yet for what goes into an NDCs. Those are currently being negotiated. So we'll soon have those. Certainly when we do our next iteration of NDCs, I think those are going to be available. And that will give us a little bit more on what it is that the capacities and what it is that you can now provide to NDCs. But a big part of NDCs, from my experience, again in Jamaica, is the GHG inventory. So this is an area you can start thinking of. How can you build capacities that countries can actually do their own inventories? Most developed, certainly small island states, and probably for the LDCs, these are done by consultants. And they leave very little in terms of capacity. You try and do a little workshop as part of the thing to build some of the capacity, but a 5-day workshop or a 2-day workshop is that it needs a longer type of an intervention. So this is something you should look at, how you can build capacities for doing the GHG inventories. And then with respect to NDCs, you also now take that information from the inventory and you put it into a mitigation abatement assessment. So you have to look at those capacities again to see where you can then intervene as building the capacity. NDC is a long haul. It's not a short term, it's a one-time exercise, as we all know. You have to do this on a 5-year succession. So you're not going to solve everything in the first 5 years. You're not going to solve everything maybe in the first 10 years. But as you start to build and do the things that you want, then over time, with educational curriculum, build those capacities naturally in the countries. It's gonna happen, I can tell you. Governance is a tricky one, because if you don't have this environment, it becomes difficult. Bobo has given a number of examples of governance. A climate change policy framework does help. We have one in Jamaica, helped by USAID and the European Union in doing that, because it then sets out what each of the relevant ministries, agencies, departments are supposed to be doing to achieving the implementation of climate change action on a whole. We are lucky in Jamaica. We have a long-term national development plan, because climate change is no longer an environmental issue, it's a development issue. If you don't address it, then there will be no development. And we're all learning for this, whether we are a developed country or a developing one, a small island state, or we're in Africa. And in that development plan, climate change is addressed. Whether it's in the energy sector, or it's with respect to good environment, where you address climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction. So those are some of the ideas. I think in a similar way, this is long-term now, that now that we have a national adaptation plan, where you can now put your various planning options into formulate it first and then have it implemented, you may have to think about a national capacity building plan in the long term. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, I saw there was a hand at the end. So please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Oops. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Anne Barr. I'm member of the Women and Gender constituency. Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for all the great presentations and interventions we've had. As we know, women are among the most impacted by climate change, but they also are powerful drivers of change, be it international, national, or at the local level. However, today they are still excluded of climate finance and access to climate technologies. And we will not be able to raise the ambition of climate action if we continue to leave behind millions of women and half of the planet's population. So when we take into consideration NDC implementations and capacity building, we really have to ensure that there is a broad participation. I heard you talking about climate governance. Public participation is crucial, and it should include a gender balance. And it also should make sure that grassroots women and people from the community level are involved in these public participation. Now, let me make a few comments and maybe suggestions as to the possibilities that are and that exist today to integrate gender and to mainstream gender much better into our mechanisms, and where maybe the PCCB could help. I heard this morning from the CTCN that regional networking forum are taking place. A question to this body, whether gender experts have been invited, for example, or what type of gender assessments and consideration have been taken into consideration. I know that the CTCN has held several webinars on gender responsive methodologies for NDC implementations, which we really appreciate. But for example, on the training modules towards the accessing GCF finance, are there any gender dimensions taken into consideration? From the GCF, we know that a lot of the projects at the moment do integrate gender more on the sideline, I would say, not as a central element of climate solutions and climate projects. And even that recently some of these projects have been rejected for being too gender-centered. So I wonder whether that is the trend that we would like to keep. And maybe in the readiness support financing, there also it could be targeting at women or community level projects that would integrate that gender dimension. And this, I repeat, not only just for the sake of human rights, which of course should be in a UN body an important priority, but it certainly also is important because that would help us raise the ambition of the climate action and really transform the way we are going forward. Then I have another point to make regarding the tech meetings and the technology committee. Technology needs assessment are also very important. One question is whether they include gender assessments in a systematic way, and what kind of safeguard assessments do they include, taking into account that some technologies might be harming rights of people or rights of women. In general, we would like also to ask parties to look at the gender action plan that is going to be adopted, we hope, this year at COP23. There you will find probably, as I was involved in the gender workshop that took place these last 2 days, a lot of very useful and practical suggestions, and we hope that you will take them forward into a decision. And I also invite you to take a look at this Gender Just Climate Solutions publication that we issued during COP22 in Marrakesh, which kind of showcases many different projects that take place on the ground in different countries, and for which we have celebrated an award during the COP. There are many copies outside this room that I hope that can give inspiration on how in technical projects or non-technical or even transformational projects, it is possible to integrate gender.
Thanks for raising this important issue. I cannot resist to add to the toolkit the CDKN publication on 10 things to know, gender equality and achieving climate goals, which is basically also gives you incredibly important messages why it is so much more effective to actually mainstream and integrate gender from the outset rather than as an afterthought. CGE wanted to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This, I have to admit that this is the first session that I'm sitting in this privileged chair representing the CGE. So please allow me the liberty to mention a couple of things that it's possible might have been mentioned by my previous predecessors. But having listened to the different presentations that were made this afternoon, I couldn't help thinking that, thinking of the role of the CGE in the context of capacity building, especially capacity building that was spoken about by colleagues like Bubu Jallo for developing countries, it might have been quite probably a very useful idea for the CGE to have had that opportunity to also mention a couple of things about the different initiative on capacity building, especially for developing countries. So maybe much take the liberty to say, if it's possible to accommodate us in future meetings like this, to just appraise the honorable members of the committee in terms of the different activities, capacity building activities that the CGE is involved in. Because I think none of us here cannot acknowledge the fact that CGE has been very, very instrumental in the context of helping countries with capacity building on different matters, not only during the convention, even when we evolved it to the Kyoto Protocol. And then now as we move towards the implementation of the Paris Agreement, I think that particular role can't be played even better. I think there is quite a great need for the role of CGE in terms of assisting countries with their capacity, needs, requirements. It's quite big. It's very, very significant. And the beauty of it is that while in certain areas we have these challenges of certain sort of constituted bodies, certain initiative to move from the Kyoto Protocol into Paris Agreement, it becomes quite an issue of negotiations. There are quite a bit of challenges how you accommodate for that. But I think, like it was said, capacity building should not even be a negotiation matter. Context, we can't really say, the CGE in its role of capacity building should be a negotiation matter. I think it's a very straightforward issue that CGE can play a very important role in this involvement from Kyoto Protocol to Paris Agreement. And the beauty of it is that, until now, CGE, I think it was mentioned that, for example, you might have bodies like this committee, they cannot go to the countries. And of course, the same challenges, CGE used to face until we realized that there is quite a great need to collaborate with entities or initiatives that actually go into the countries. So, for example, CGE has been working very, in very close collaboration with, for example, programs that were formed. In this case, I would particularly mention the GEF-supported program called Global Support Program, which is an initiative between UNEP and UNDP to provide capacity building, including matters of, for example, which has been quite an interesting topic of INDC, to the extent that GSP, in collaboration with the CGE, UNFCCC, UNDP, have even been, involved at country level to provide technical support on INDC issues. It's just unfortunate that I don't know how, my friend Bubujalo, we missed your country, because I can actually see that, yes, there was that need. But basically what happened was that, these countries were contacted in terms of reviewing the submitted INDC, because we all remember that some of the INDCs were 2-pagers. And of course, it was recognized that there might be a need for countries to say, wait a moment, what we submitted, we really need to review to make something that, to make sure that we have something that makes sense. And then, of course, we were providing support in that particular aspect. Even as of now, in collaboration with UNFCCC and UNDP, we have an INDC help desk where countries can just get in touch with us and say, look, we are struggling in this particular area. We are struggling to relate these issues to national development goals, and we are quite happy to help. And CG is very instrumental in doing that as well. And as such, one of the issues that I really would like to highlight is for the fact that rather than waiting to see how CGE is going to be involved in this whole issue of Paris Agreement related capacity building, I really would like to request members of this committee to start having those thoughts now. Because rather than wait until it's too late, that's when you remember to bring up the role of CGE. I think it might be too late. So as we move along, crafting the path of capacity building for countries and what, I really would like to urge, members of this committee, this honorable committee, not to forget CGE and not forget the role that CGE has played all along since we have been discussing these issues for more than 20 years. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I saw 2 hands at the back, so I'll take the one there first and then later.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I want us to consider the following institutions: Universidad de San Carlos de Guatemala, the University of the South Pacific, the University of the Gambia, the University of the West Indies, the Universidad Autónoma de Santo Domingo, and the University of Eastern Finland. What do they all have in common? They are about building capacity. They're about building capacity in universities. And I just heard my friend Clifford refer to universities, and we've talked about the role of universities at adaptation committee meetings. A number of the presentations today address that. And this second question, what are some of the existing and innovative solutions to address the capacity needs and gaps identified above? I want to answer that. Now, my name is Greg Walker. I'm a professor at Oregon State University in the USA. And a number of us, including Marilyn Averill next to me from the University of Colorado, we've worked closely for the last 2 years with Salim Hook, who many of you know from Independent University, Bangladesh, and he sends his regrets. He was going to be here as an observer, but family issues kept him in Dhaka. So we really look to him for leadership. And under his leadership, there are 2 new organizations emerging that are attempting to bring universities together to support not only the work of the PCCB, but the work of the Adaptation Committee, and in fact, the work of communities at an in-country level, certainly at a local level, to certainly deal with adaptation in particular. One of those institutions is referred to as the LUCCC, the Least Developed Countries Universities Consortium for Climate Change. And Salim's vision of this is that this is South-South university connections from least developed countries. And the launch for this will be at the end of June in Uganda at the 11th Conference on Community-Based Adaptation. The other one, and the one that I'm involved with, is not as far along, but we're developing it. It's called the Universities Network for Climate Capacity. And we've identified a shared secretariat at Independent University, Bangladesh, led by Salim Hook, and at my university, Oregon State University in the USA. We're developing a memorandum of understanding. It's with my university lawyers right now. But the real point here is that we want to develop a global network of universities that doesn't certainly duplicate, but complements the efforts of so many different initiatives. But we really think that universities, when it comes to implementing the Paris Agreement, universities represent a kind of untapped resource. And we're typically, and I'll say this from my career, I've been in the environmental policy arena for almost 30 years, and I will say that by and large, not always, universities are reasonably trustworthy by people to be fair, to be impartial, to be able to bring researchers together with community leaders, to be able to provide that integration between science and policy. And again, under Salim's vision, which many of us share, we really think that universities need to contribute more to the work that you are doing and the work that needs to be done. I do have with me concept notes, little flyers. I'll put them out. So as you go to break, if you want to read more about them, by all means do that. But I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share the news of these two new university organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's one more hand at the back. Yes, Togo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank all presenters for the nice presentation. Me, as a member of LDC countries, I would like to say I endorse completely the presentation of Mr. Bubu, completed by Madame Mary, which reflect completely our need in context of capacity building and implementation of climate change actions. And I believe that you will take this as an important input in the preparation of the guidance regarding capacity building action over the world. I believe that you will have to visit, to consult many institutions in order to collect main elements which will help you to guide or to give guidance at the conference regarding this issue, this item of capacity building. For LDCs, you have already important element. But I can't go again, repeat what have said the two presenters of LDCs, but particularly concerning the coherence and coordination, it is something very important that PCB must focus on, and I welcome Morocco as co-chairing PCB, Morocco, who is willing even to maybe to gather all African countries in some workshops to help on the aspect of guidance, of coherence, of coordination. It is very important. But for Mr. Bubu, you answer to the priority of LDCs, and you said transforming INDC in NDC will be the priority. But I would like to add one word. When preparing transforming INDC in NDC, immediately we have to prepare the plan of implementation of INDC, because NDC is something very abstract. We don't, it is a guidance like a plan, but without the way to implement, to do exact really, to implement really activities. So a plan, national plan for each country related to the NDC will be very helpful and will be also taken account in the PCB request for preparing guidance to the convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are approaching the end. I think Bubu wanted to add one thing that he forgot to say in his earlier intervention, and I think then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, big brother. Yes, in transforming the INDCs into NDCs, of course, for them to be transformed so that they become implementable, you must have an implementation strategy. That is right. For the lady who talked about gender issues, yes, you know, I'm even seeing now templates of project preparation where if you don't supply gender information, you may not get that project. This is true in Jeff. This is true with GCF and all other donors and partners that are providing funding. You must supply gender issues in the project, otherwise you may not get the funding. For the Gambia, we have the Women's Bureau on our National Climate Committee. And for every COP, we bring the lady who is responsible for gender issues, gender and environment, climate change issues in the Women's Bureau. So this is an example of how we are doing it. I forgot to answer Mohammed's when he raised about private sector. Yes, private sector is again very important, particularly when you want to mobilize resources. They are also more efficient than the public sector in implementation. This is my experience. Yeah, that is why that is why, for example, in the Gambia, when we were selecting our national designated authority for the GCF, of course, we selected the Ministry of Finance as our designated national authority and the Department of Budget as the head of the Department of Budget as the focal point. But again, as the in partnership with the Gambia Chamber of Commerce, we chose them to be partnering in serving as the national designated. So the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and the Ministry of Finance are serving as our national designated authority for the simple reason that the GCF has a private sector facility. So we want the private sector of the Gambia to work with the Ministry of Finance to be able to facilitate the interaction between the country and the GCF. So I think that we are trying to take, and this is now being taken up in many other countries. In terms of yes, universities, these are very important. But I can assure you, there are very few universities, particularly in Africa, and LDCs for that matter, that are doing climate change. Some of them are now being introduced. A very important and efficient program that is happening in Africa is a very good example. And there is a lot of turnover of expertise now, or trained experts. And this is the German-funded WASCAL, the SASCAL, and then, where in West Africa you have 11 universities that are funded by the German government to train every year or every 2 years, either at the PhD level or at the master's level. And for all of those universities are treating a different thematic area. For the Gambia, the program there is climate change and education as the master's level. Togo has one, Nigeria has one, Nigeria has two, Mali has one, Burkina Faso has one, Ghana has one, Senegal has one, which I know is climate change and economics. And it's the same thing in East Africa and Southern Africa. And it is well funded. This is not a program where you say there is no fund. The German government provides adequate funding for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the chairs like to do any wrap up at this stage? It's in the agenda, but we can leave it for later. As you wish. Later. Okay, let us now break for. Can I expect there to be coffee? Good. Let's break for 15 minutes, then come back here, and then after a quick introduction, actually split into two breakout groups for some work for everybody to do. But let's be here in 15 minutes. Thank you.
I need to be here. Yeah.
Fine, how are you?
Shall we start? Okay. Okay, people will still trickle in, but I have a very brief introduction to this next session, which is actually about two breakout groups, which will be led by Vedis and by Crispin. We'll try to do it in this room so that one stays here in this corner and the other goes out. And there are two themes. Number one theme is Vedis's theme, and it's strengthening collaboration between different actors to support capacity building activities for the implementation of NDCs in the context of the Paris Agreement. So the guiding questions would be, how can the PCCB serve as the connecting bridge among actors under and outside the convention? And I think this is important. It's not only under, because we know that there are hundreds of others outside the convention supporting capacity building activities in developing countries. How can it contribute to increased synergies among them? And how can the PCCB collaborate with constituted bodies under the convention to address current and emerging capacity gaps and needs in implementing NDCs? So it's really about the coherence and collaboration and avoidance of overlaps and looking for complementarities. That's one. The other one is Crispin's group that will discuss enhancing the capacities of developing countries to implement NDC. So it's really the what needs to be done in the countries and solutions and best practices. It's really about kind of the themes itself. Guiding questions, how can the PCCB address the main institutional, systemic and individual capacity gaps and needs in implementing NDCs? And what can the PCCB do to promote an exchange of information, good practices and lessons? This is about the sharing part of it. Lessons learned contributing to address current and emerging capacity gaps and needs in implementing NDCs. So these are two, one really on collaboration and one on the tools and actual actions, the substance of it. Vedis, as you're sitting there, you have a shorter distance to that corner. And Crispin stays in this corner. And you have two flip charts. And I think we would like to, if possible, to get a little bit of an even balance between the groups so that there wouldn't be one person in one and 30 in the other. So hopefully there will be a natural breakdown. But we would give 30 minutes to this discussion. And then the moderators would come back and report to the groups of really, the purpose here is to hear from all of you. Participate. It's been a little bit, we here, you there. Let's have a more dynamic conversational 30 minutes from now on. So this is this group about, this is breakout group one. Oh, this is breakout group one. So this is about, this is Vedis, actually. This is breakout group one. And that is breakout group two, which is Crispin's. So one, meaning collaboration. Two, meaning the substance of it and the information need and recommendations of how to share. The time starts now, and we'll reconvene with the summaries at 5:15. We are converting the results into slides. It'll take about 5 minutes, so bear with us and then we'll resume. Okay, attention, please. Now we've got all the technology has again delivered excellent work. So we have now the rapporteurs, the results of the two working groups actually on slides. And I guess they will just be presented. I would assume working group 1 would be the first one to start. So let us ask Viris to summarize.
Thank you, and I'll do it fairly quickly. We had a great group consisting only of natural collaborators, and we got lots of good suggestions. We've tried to compile them into some key points, 5 key points, but there was a discussion where we all identified that there was a need for mapping capacity building needs. There's a need for some kind of database on capacity building initiatives that can also be used when reporting back to the COP. And it seems like the national communications and the BURs are the only places where parties are reporting on their capacity building needs, and that it could be beneficial if the modalities on how this is done are strengthened. So our main points would be the ones that you see behind you. Compile information on capacity building gaps to report back to the COP, for example, through a database or another means of information which maps the needs in a holistic manner. The second point is compilation of available training on capacity building to be put on, that is available online, as well as other reference materials in order to have capacity building training reach as broadly as possible. There was a suggestion that the PCCB could establish a task force on specific capacity building issues. We didn't go into detail on what those issues could be, but that was a point raised. The establishment of national capacity building focal points. We've discussed that briefly yesterday. That's also a good idea that was mentioned again. And the last point, if the PCCB could provide guidelines on how capacity building needs are reported in national reports to the Convention, including the national communications and the BURs. Thanks.
So if there are any further comments from the participants or any emerging immediate questions? Consensus. So I think now we could go to working group 2.
Thanks. Thanks, Ari. We were looking at enhancing the capacities of developing countries to implement NDCs in the context of the Paris Agreement, and we had a really, really rich and lively discussion. So much so I thought I wouldn't remember any of it. There was so much going back and forth. But we basically recognized that the two questions, that the two guiding questions were almost, in a way, almost one and the same. And that if you understood how we could exchange information, then it would be relatively easy to decide what the content of the discussion would be, in a sense, secondary, in a sense. But we recognize the need to go beyond seeing the capacity building portal only as a platform, as a how would I say, as a two-dimensional platform, so to speak, for information exchange. We saw it more as a platform that can be enhanced in terms of allowing for communication, conversation. And we saw that if we recognize that if we established or got designated focal points, both at the country and organizational level, there could be active exchange and there could be matching as I think I may have said at an earlier time, demand and supply for capacity building services. And it was proposed that we could form task forces to look at specific areas of interest and concern. And also we could glean information from other existing portals to collect information on capacity building activities. And we could contact governments, request specific information, convene workshops to establish workshop networks within the PCCB. And one of the things I mentioned personally was that since I've been here at this meeting, we've had over the last couple of days, I've personally made a number of contacts with agencies or partners, and we've planned to discuss a number of issues. When we get back to base and to work further from this. So the actual coming together in itself is of value in terms of furthering aims and objectives. We in terms of needs assessments, the capacity building needs assessment needed for the PCCB. So we need specific assessments that need to be done to address gaps and needs. In other words, there's information already under the Bonn platform, for example, under the coming out of the proceedings of this meeting and something that was not mentioned, but in the discussion, but afterwards, was that the capacity assessments done under the BORs that could be sources of information, among others, that could be used to identify gaps. But these would probably need to be pulled together amalgamated, and we could request that nicely ask the Secretariat to assist us in doing that kind of compilation and analysis, and that the PCCB could prepare guidelines with steps, which could assist with NDC implementation. We could establish a library of good practices and lessons learned through submissions of gaps and needs. And the PCCB could also get in touch with governments, as was previously indicated. One of the things that came up, one of our young participants in our group was making the point that they have their own website, which, and they reach their own constituencies. And the whole issue of what I called was networking and could also be used. In other words, we don't have to sell the message ourselves. In other words, it's not only our portal. We can exchange information, share the message with other portals who can reach certain constituencies. For example, if there's a consortium of say universities, and we pass on the pertinent information to them, they can advertise I'm using the word advertise, and market within their own circles. The same for youth and so on. And it could also be not just thematic, but also at a regional level. So if there's a group in Africa, for example, and there's a specific interest to that group, you could reach out to them and so on. So it was, like I said, a rich discussion, and this is just a summary of what took place. If I forgot anything, well, people can either address it now or they can clobber me outside of the room afterwards.
It's been the same question to any urgent reactions or disagreements? Oh, that was provocative. I shouldn't have said. I think it's 5:45. I think I will not start wrapping up. I think we'll digest many things that we've heard today. But I wonder if the co-chairs would like to say just a few concluding words of today, who will not be with us tomorrow.
Yeah, but do you have the? Yeah, it's coming. So before Mohammed officially tells where we are and where we are heading to, I must say that today has been really a rich exchange of views, and it gives also for us quite challenging task for tomorrow, because tomorrow we are supposed to agree on our work plan, and there are now, I don't know, maybe not a million things, but 500,000 things which have been surfaced here, and all of them have their own profits and justification, but just in order to make the work of PCCB and our report for the SBI, and then through SBI to COP, we have to think that what is important, how do we prioritize, what we can really do with the resources we have. So let's sleep a little bit overnight and think, let our brains to work unconsciously during our good sleep, and when we are fresh tomorrow morning, we could start then to think that how exactly how in practice our work plan would look like. But now I hand over to Mohammed. Thanks to everybody, and a special thanks to Ari.
Thank you very much, Matti. Colleagues, to close for today, we wanted to give you a brief overview of where we stand at the moment. Let me briefly reiterate the intended outcomes for this first meeting of the PCCB. As per the annotated agenda for this meeting, the following are the action items to be addressed by the PCCB at this meeting. Agenda item 4, working modalities and procedures of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building. Action, the PCCB will be invited to further develop and adopt its working modalities and procedures. Agenda item 5, implementation of the 2016 to 2020 capacity building work plan. The PCCB will be invited to agree on its activity to implement the 2016-2020 capacity building work plan, including on intersessional work as appropriate, taking into consideration the invitation by the COP as contained in the decision 16 CP.22 paragraph 4. Agenda item 6, focus area on theme of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building activity for the implementation of nationally determined contribution in the context of the Paris Agreement action. The PCCB will be invited to agree on its approach to the implementation of 2017 focus area or theme of the PCCB, including an intersessional work as appropriate. Item 7, focus area on the theme of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building for 2018. The PCCB will be invited to discuss and agree on its 2018 focus area or theme with a view to including this information in its technical progress report to COP23. Agenda item 8, annual technical progress report of the Paris Committee on the capacity building to the conference of the parties. The PCCB will be invited to agree on the content and process for preparing its technical progress report to the COP23. This is what PCCB is intending to achieve during this meeting. In terms of what we have achieved so far, for agenda item 4, the PCCB agreed to adopt the rules of procedure of the PCCB and the working modality of the PCCB as contained in the document PCCB 2017/1/3. For the agenda item 7, the PCCB agreed to continue in 2018 to focus area or theme on capacity building activities for the implementation of national determined contribution in the context of the Paris Agreement. So far tomorrow, for the agenda item 5, 6, And 8, the PCCB need to finalize work on all matters under consideration for those agenda item. For agenda item 7, the agreement still pending relate to the representatives of constitutes body operating entity to be invited to meeting of the PCCB in 2018. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think that completes today's deliberation. So actually, I would not, this is too official, today's discussions. From my part, thank you very much for active participation. It's been a pleasure to be engaged. And I think with this, I'll turn to the Secretariat for some housekeeping announcements.
Thank you, Ari. Just briefly, the meeting is scheduled to start tomorrow at 9. Just for participants to bear in mind that tomorrow is Saturday, so if you're using public transport, the times, please check the times because they're different to the weekdays. Also, just to let you know, so that being a Saturday, the canteen here in this building is closed. But for those participants registered to the SB sessions, you can use the facilities there. And there are other options for participants that may not be registered to the sessions in terms of restaurants close by. Just wanted to alert participants on these matters, and then the meeting will start tomorrow at 9 as scheduled. Thank you very much.